What's up? Jake Reed here. Today, I want to talk about 80s drum sounds. You know the sound I'm talking about? The sound that defined a decade. So let's just go ahead and get this out of the way right now. We all think of Phil Collins immediately with this sound, but we have to give credit to engineer Hugh Padgham and producer Steve Lillywhite, who really pioneered this sound. So anyway, some other drummers from this era: Jeff Porcaro, Harvey Mason, John J.R. Robinson, or J.R., Omar Hakim, Phil Collins, Dennis Chambers, Carlos Vega, Tony Thompson, Prince, Phil Collins, Vinny Colaiuta, Manu Katché, the Steves, of course, Steve Gadd, Steve Jordan, Phil Collins, Steve Ferroni, and LA Session veteran Steve Schaefer, and Ndugu Chancellor, Phil Collins, Mike Baird, and last but not least, my hero and teacher, Peter Erskine. I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of names, but that's all I got for now. Phil Collins. Don't forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe. Do it. So the first way we're going to talk about is gated ambience. So I'm basically taking the sound of my room and compressing the snot out of it, and then I'm going to gate that snot. The second way is classic gated reverb with the non-lens setting. Gated reverb. And the third way that I want to talk about is what I like to call the classic 80s studio sound. Like you'd hear on some soft rock hits, or some yacht rock. Yacht rock's popular these days. Dad rock. So yeah, the classic 80s studio sound with a nice reverb and lots of it. Solid 80s gold. So I just want to emphasize, like I do in all of my videos, that I'm not literally trying to get the same exact sounds from the 80s with the same exact methods that they would use from the 80s, same signal chain and everything, because it's kind of impossible to. It's more like get inspired by the sound and then find your own way to get that sound. All right, so this first sound we're going for is a gated ambience. So I'm basically going to take the sound of the room and I'm going to compress that and then gate it. And you'll notice that I got the drums tuned up a little higher. They're a little grittier sounding, a little more open tuning. One piece of tape on top here, one on the bottom. And I'm using coated ambassadors, so they're a little brighter sounding because, you know, you got to think that the more synthesizers and guitars you start layering into a song, these toms are going to start to sound smaller and smaller if you muffle them too much. So I like to keep them as wide open as I can get away with to preemptively think ahead and know that there's going to be a lot of layers of other frequencies that could potentially make the drums sound way tinier. You notice I'm also using 4.5 by 14, 12, 14-inch toms, clear power stroke 3 on the kick drum, smooth white power stroke 3 on the front head. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and put one more piece of tape right down here just to get rid of just that extra little overtone there, but there we go. You'll notice I'm not hitting rim shots because the rim shots will kind of choke the drum a little bit too much for this particular sound. So I'm hitting right in the middle, which sounds pretty awesome. So the way that I like to record this most of the time is shells, cymbals, shells, cymbals, shells, cymbals. There's one thing you have to remember. It's shells, then cymbals. Not cymbals, then shells, and not cymbals and shells, shells, then cymbals. Okay? So start with only the shells of the drums. We'll add the cymbals later. That way we can make the most out of our gates. And keep in mind, there's tons of ways of doing this. A lot of times in the 80s, you know, it would be like just kick, hat, and snare first, and then overdub the toms, then overdub the cymbals. But the main thing is, cymbals in general don't like gates. All right, here we go. Real quick, I just wanted to go over a couple of things that are making the gated ambience really happen. All right, here we go. Probably most importantly is this far room mic. So this is the buyer mic that's in the other room. That's what it sounds like just going through the transient designer. With the compression back on. And then with the gate on. The other thing that's happening is I have this mono effects mic, which is down pretty low. Here's what it sounds like all the way up. And again, you can hear it's getting hit pretty hard. All right, here we go. Okay, for the room mics, I'm just basically nuking the room mics. I'm not putting a gate on them. So it's really getting smashed, and then just kind of had that blended in to taste. All the other mics are just doing their thing. I manually gated my toms. Okay, and that's that. Who cares about snare bottom and hi-hat? And then for the kick in, just a little bit of compression. Not a lot going on there. EQ, actually a lot going on for the EQ, because I really wanted to make that top end pop out. Adding a lot of low end. On the master bus here, or the drum bus, sorry, I just have a little bit of this API 2500. Okay. All right, so real quick, I just wanted to show how awesome it sounds when you take all the tape off and just go completely wide open with rim shots. That's the key here. So we're going for that crack from the snare. That's just gonna cut through everything, but I'm leaving it wide open. Pretty cool. So there you have it. All right, so as I'm getting set up for the next kit here, I just wanted to show you where I had that other room mic that we were getting the gated Ambience with. Here it is, it's a Beyer M160. Probably not the greatest mic choice since it's so low output, but it sounded cool and it worked. And so yeah, here's the room. As you can hear, my voice in here is like super reverberant. Pretty bright. This is my wife's keyboard studio mini mode. All right, so the second 80s vibe that we're going for uses a non-linear reverb. It's more of a gated reverb sound. I don't really do it the technical way that you're supposed to. If you go on YouTube, you'll find like the actual technique to like make the reverb key off of the whatever, blah, blah, blah. I don't really do that because a lot of times when I'm tracking for people, I'm just trying to get the sound right with the drums and just get the vibe as quickly as I can. So what I'll do is I'll use a non-linear reverb and I'll just adjust the size of it on the reverb itself to correspond with the tempo of the song. And that goes a lot faster. So that's like my little shortcut. And of course, I know it might be obvious, but we got concert toms here and there's no front head on the bass drum. So we're going for maximum projection of the impact of the sound, and then that non-lin reverb is going to carry it the rest of the way. And the thing is, you'll notice that I'm tuning the toms a little lower and muffling them because I want the sustain of the drum, of the note, to come from the reverb. I don't want it to come from the actual drum itself. I just want the impact of the drum, and then the non-linear reverb has a great, you know, very 80s cool sound that will really act as the sustain or the length of the note. Here's what it sounds like. You'll also notice that I'm not going to play any rim shots because I basically want that low fundamental of the snare drum to really come out, and that's going to translate really well through this reverb. If I'm playing rim shots, it's just going to choke the drum and not really have that fat backbeat that you can hang your hat on. So yeah, that's why I'm muffling the drum a little more and not playing rim shots. Now you can record the cymbals separately, you can record the toms separately, you can do like kick, hat, snare, and then overdub toms, and then overdub cymbals. There's really no right or wrong way, it's all about basically your intent, what you're going for. But you'll notice that I will be playing cymbals on this. It's okay to play the cymbals lightly, and they really won't, you know, get too mangled by the non-linear reverb. So, here we go. Here we go. Okay, so real quick, I just wanted to go over the second kit, and the name of the game here, well, again, I'm manually gating all the toms just because it's easier for me, but that's not the important part. The important part is this non-linear reverb down here. This is what's controlling the size right here. This is what's controlling the length of the reverb for me. That's my little shortcut for doing this. Check it out. Way too long, right? Still way too long. Yeah, that's like a whole quarter note, basically. But I basically time it to the length I want it to be. Which is about 44% in this instance. So yeah, you can time it to whatever you want it to be. It could be, I could go half of that. So Here we go. Which also sounds cool. It's a lot shorter. Everything is getting bussed to that non-lin reverb to give it that feel, even a little bit of the kick drum. That's all it is. And then there's a little bit of room mic and a little bit of plate, but that's all that's going on here. Okay, real quick, just wanted to go over the outboard gear I'm using. Again, you can do a lot of this with plugins and achieve a similar sound, but I just like to use analog stuff. So, kick in is going through this BAE 1073, which is then going into this DBX 160 to get that nice 80s kick drum compression. Pretty awesome. You can see it's like barely hitting it. Threshold's way up. Barely compressing it. Then this Neve 1073 here with the green light going off. That's the mic that's in the other room, the Buyer that's in the bright room, and then I'm processing it through this transient designer here. And you can see I just have the attack the same because I'm not trying to take away any attack, I'm just trying to make the sustain a lot bigger. And then I'm compressing that with a plugin, and that is what allows me to gate it and get that huge gated ambience sound. So there's your ambience right there. That's our ambience. And then we're gating it. Okay, cool. Snare top going through this Neve 1073. Toms going through these JLM TG 500s, Neve style pre's. Overheads going through these 512s. These are my room mics, the AEA N8s, and then they're going through these AEA RPQ 500s. I'm adding a little bit of top in there because my room's pretty dark to begin with, so I just brighten it up a little bit, as you can see. Then down here, this Manly dual preamp. So one of the pre's, it's a tube pre, it's going through the pedals, which is just basically going through this Blue Sky, and it's just on the room setting because I want it to sound like a room. And then I'm gonna compress the snot out of that and gate it. So again, gated ambience using pedals because I have a small room. And then this last pre here, this is my overhead mono going through this tube pre, and then I'm nuking it, as you can see, through this distressor. It's awesome. Adding a little distortion there. You can see the settings there. Like it matters. Cool. And then all the other stuff like snare bottom, hi-hat, all that good stuff. That's just going through, you know, the built-in UA pre's. No big deal. Okay, that's it. Sup? What's up? Okay, so this is the third drum set, the third 80s setup. I like to call it the 80s studio setup because when I think of 80s studio drummers like Steve Gadd, John Robinson, Peter Erskine, Jeff Porcaro, Carlos Vega, the list goes on and on. I always think of this kind of setup with the, not that these guys always use that sound because that's not true, but I do think of this setup with the pinstripes, Remo pinstripes on the toms. The snare drum's an old Acrolite from the 60s. It was my first snare drum when I was growing up. They're really cheap snares and they're very versatile. This one's just tuned medium. And what I did is I cut a ring out from an old drum head and stuck it on top. Very apropos of the era. That's the sound to me. I call it the 80s studio sound because all those studio drummers use this sort of sound, this sort of setup. Even though all of them have their own vocabulary and their own way of playing, they all, it seems to be, I should have mentioned Vinny too, Vinny Colaiuta in there. They all sort of have this 4-tom setup. I have everything tuned kind of medium. These are kind of like fusion tom sizes. 10, 12, 13, 14 down here. Pretty awesome. To kind of help match this 80s sound, I'm using some thinner, smaller cymbals so they decay really fast. The ride cymbal is more of a medium weight with a very pronounced bell sound. It's just an old A. These are 70s new beats, but that way they decay really fast, right? And they're kind of bright sounding. I mean, not as bright as like A Customs or something, but that way they decay really fast, which is also part of that sound. So you'll hear in this example, I got my lovely wife to play some mini Moog and some Rhodes just to kind of get more in that style, and you'll hear how these drums, this kind of setup, is able to blend into those instruments. So in terms of how I'm approaching playing this kit in terms of touch, you'll notice I'm not gonna play any rim shots, and I'm actually playing a little lighter. That way I'm getting more tone out of the drum and a little less attack than if I were just smacking the daylights out of the drums. That way I can turn up the gain a little more on all these close mics and you get more of a warmer, richer tone. Yeah, so here we go. Okay, so here's the third kit, the 80s studio sound, as I like to call it. And you'll see, again, I've manually gated all the toms just because I can. Aw, yeah. Regulate. Okay, so basically what's going on here, let's start with the kick. Compressing. Yep. I'm just really trying to get that punchy 80s sound. Lots of top end added there. Wow, that's a lot of high end. And some low end, scooping the mids out a little bit. I'm just trying to get it super punchy. So that's about it for the kick in. Some compression on the snare. About 10 dB, yeah. And then adding some low end, some of that snary stick snap, and then some top end. Also doing the same thing here to the, well, almost the same thing to the 451. The 451, you'll notice I have up higher than the 57 in the mix. That way it just gets a little more detail. It's a little snappier sounding. I just like it. It's cool. Actually using the hi-hat mic for once in this mix. Pretty cool. The main thing here is lots of plate reverb. I'm using an EMT 140 on this. You could also do it with, sometimes I use Valhalla, but I'm not this time. Not a lot of compression going on. I turned off the compressors in the room and the overheads. Again, it's just that tight. I'm just trying to get like a lot of the close mics because the overheads sound like by themselves. kick and overheads. Kick, snare, overheads. Awesome. Let's hear what these toms sound like by themselves. Here they come. Wow, awesome. Rooms are way down. Just adding a little bit of ambience. This Coles was going through that distressor. Sounds great. Oh, let's hear those toms again. Wow. Beautiful. Another 80s technique I like to use sometimes when you gotta get those smooth, sweet, solid gold 80s ballads rockin', is I'll use a deeper snare. This is just a coated ambassador on an 8x14 80s recording custom. You can do it on any deep snare, really. It doesn't have to be this exact one. And I taped it up because I just want to get the impact, the chest punch of the snare itself. And then I'm gonna let the reverb create the sustain and the space for the sound of the backbeat. Oh yeah, and you'll also notice, again, no rim shots, playing right in the middle. But something that would be typical of the 80s would be to use like a 16th note pre-delay. It's like I don't have to play all the 16th notes all the time. Basically it fires off a 16th note late. Then that way you get this other cool rhythmic motion happening using the reverb. So it creates this other form of rhythmic propulsion for the beat, which is pretty neat. Neat beat. Ha ha ha. Okay. Okay, so the main thing, yeah, with this Ballad snare, like I mentioned before, is the pre-delay that I'm putting on our plate reverb. And you'll see I have it all the way up to 207 milliseconds. That's about that 16th note. If I put it up way too far, it sounds broken. No pre-delay, also sounds fine, but again, I'm just trying to add that rhythmic propulsion to it. And there you have it. So, there you have it. 80 sounds. Lots of reverb. That's basically all you gotta know. Of course, there's lots of stuff I left out, and I get that, but there's just too much to talk about. I know, I left out Def Leppard. I'm leaving out a lot of things. Guns N' Roses, Huey Lewis, Eddie Money, of course. 808s, Toto, Linn drum machines. There's a lot to cover. But like I said, these are just a few ways that I go about getting these sounds and use them in a modern context. Be inspired by it, do your own thing with it, make new music. I want to say that's it. All right, until next time.